Hey internationals, I'm so glad to be here and I'm excited also for this new topic. And how are you today? The sun is shining, it's good weather? No, almost good weather, but the most important thing is that you have good weather in your heart. And it's not depending on your circumstances, it's depending on how you related are with the Lord. And maybe you have also a tough question today. You brought a personal tough question. And you're maybe also saying, like me, why didn't, maybe you watched the Germans in the European Championships, did you? And everyone was asking, why didn't they get into the quarterfinals? And as a original Swiss, I was very happy that we were in the quarterfinals. And but only in the quarterfinals. But you watched the game. It was crazy good. No, you didn't watch. Okay, you have to watch it again because it's really cool. It was really till the last second. It was high intensity. And today we're going to focus on one question: why should I obey the government? If you would stay here, what would you say? Why should I obey the government? What does the Bible say about this? Before March 2020, the world was more or less in order. Everyone was thought, okay, not really bad things can happening, right? And then March came. Nobody was thinking, okay, coronavirus, it goes over after a few weeks, everything is okay. Okay, maybe a few months, okay, then afterwards we will have a good world again. And now you are still here with masks. We looked to Asia and we said, yeah, crazy people, they're all wearing masks. Few months later, everyone was wearing masks here. And the politicians were saying first, no, the mask, they do not avoid the virus, so it's not good when you're wearing a mask. And after a few weeks, they were telling you, you all have to wear a mask. And you said, what crazy politicians are they? What do they say? Sometimes they are saying this, sometimes they are saying this. And in Germany, people were protesting against the government. And the restrictions were too strict, too hard, too strong. And in Brazil, the opposite. People were on the street, they were protesters, they were saying, too less restrictions, we need more restriction. The world is really crazy. Do you agree with me? And today, we want to focus on these topics about the government. I read this sentence, why do bees have a queen and not a federal government? Because they want to produce honey and not trash. Okay, I think everyone has their experience with the government. What I observed also, people who are working for the government, like police, or people who are in public duty, firefighters, ambulance drivers, and so on, they are more and more also have to reckon with violence, mobbing during their missions, during their job. And more, they are really also have to fight with people who do not accept this kind of executive. And let's go a little bit deeper into the Bible today, and we will find out why we really do have to obey the government, or sometimes why not. In Romans 13 it's written, maybe we can read that together, or even you are wearing your mask, you're very good in reading, okay? Okay, let's read it together. Let everyone be subject to the government authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God, not by the devil. Chaos is brought by the devil. God brought order. And here it's written, the Greek term hypotasso means you really have to submit, you have to accept the commandments. First, it was in the military service, when this word was used, hypotasso, to be subject to, or to submit to, it was the term was used for an order. When you are in the military, I was in the military for a longer time than normal people. And I was there, and when the officer said something to me, I had to say, aye, sir, I'm doing it. There was not a discussion, oh, today I'm not feeling good, I cannot bring this order into action. or you are not likable officers, I do not accept you. No, there was no discussion, no, zero. And Paul says here, you are not in the military, we as Christian. You submit your life voluntarily, and it's your responsibility as Christian that you are carrying also the burden to uphold the order of this world by accepting the government. Do you understand what I mean? But maybe you are here and you're saying, yeah, but I come from a state which is really very brutal. And I observe also some of these guys from Belarus, for example, Alexander Lukashenko. He brought a journalist from Ryanair down to earth and put him into prison only because he criticized him. And Lukashenko is a bad guy. Janez Janša, a Slovenian prime minister, he's against the newspaper who criticizing him, and now he is the first prime minister, he is responsible for the European Union for this year. So he has to rule. And everyone is a little bit, oh, how will it be with this guy? He does not accept criticism. Oh, Putin poisons Alexei Navalny. Very bad. And you're saying, wow, God put this order, but God put this authority over us? Or maybe in Muslim countries, Christians are killed. Homosexuals are publicly executed. They have to jump from a skyscraper or will be publicly hanged. And you're saying, are you really sure that God really put this authority over people? Even Jesus in his time, he accepted authority. But he had another view. He saw the kingdom of God is already coming. And also when you are living in a country such this, then you have to say, hey, there is hope. Because this government will not be for eternal. Who is to be, to whom we have to subordinate, to whom we have to submit? We read in the Bible, citizens to the government, church members to the leaders and elders, or the pastors. It's sometimes a good thing, but sometimes it's really also not a good thing, right? To have a responsibility. Employees to their superiors, children to their parents. Christians have to submit to one another, the church to Christ and Christians to God. You know, when you really feel that submission is something really good, having an order, when my wife is submitting to me and I'm submitting to her, then we are very, very strong. And there is a clear order. Or when citizens are for the state, or when the church is really hold together with this kind of, hey, we want to reach a goal, we have the same vision, we have the same dream, and we really accept each other and we accept also the leadership. This is very, very strong. But what is the task of the state? What would you say? It's written in Romans 13:4, or the one in authority is God's servants, for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath, to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. And in another verse, Peter also emphasis on this. He says, or to governors who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong and to command those who do right. For it is God's will that by doing good you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. By doing good. So the only thing what we can do also as a church, doing good. And we can silence all this. Doing good also for the state. And sometimes I do not see that the state or the government really accept this and also honor this. Also the Free Evangelical Church here in Germany, that they are really recognized as this, that we are doing a lot of good in the last 10 years since we are here in Stuttgart. We donated a lot of money to the poor people and also to poor countries, but they do not recognize this. But what is the task? What is the task of the authority? They have to punish the wrongdoers. They have to punish those who are murderers. So this is an official the so-called official offense when someone is, for example, a murder, then the state will punish or will take this case in its hand and will punish the murderer, will search for him because it's the state. Can you imagine you're living in a state where there is no rule, where there is no order? This is crazy. This is the hell. When you don't have a state with an order, and God is a God of order. Sometimes I'm looking, I see the nature, and the more I'm getting older, I see the nature. It's more for me. It's more and more beautiful. When you see the flowers, for example, I wasn't the kind of the flower freak, but I have a garden now, and I really love to see the flowers. Do you see these flowers? What kind of order is this? God is a God of order. And He puts not only an order, and He puts in its order great creativity. Or maybe you see this sunset, and when you are romantic, you like this. All the couples here, or those who are in love with someone, you can imagine sitting there. And God put everything together for our good. So order has always to do with God wants to do something good for you. It's not the rules. But if you are living in a world or in a state which is really very bad, like Syria. So Assad is a very bad guy, right? I get to know his father. I once had to protect him in Geneva. And I saw this guy already there, and this guy already killed a lot of people, and his son is killing people since years and decades. And what do we do then? When someone is in an authority which is really a very bad guy. And when we see a little bit in the Old Testament, when we look to the Old Testament, we see two Hebrew midwives, Shipra and Puah, who I recognize and I admire very, very much, because they had the courage to stand up against King Pharaoh. We read in the Bible, the midwives, you can read it in Exodus 1, the midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. So you could say, well, why didn't they do that? They let the boys live because they had the order to kill all the boys, because the Israelites were too strong there. They were in the slavery. Within 430 years, the population grew and grew more and more. And the king was afraid that they could maybe overtake the state. Then the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live? The midwives answered to Pharaoh, very smart, Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are witches and give birth before the midwives arrive. So they are different. That's why King Pharaoh, they were very, very smart. Instead of killing them, they said this to the King Pharaoh. Maybe today you are also saying, I am living in a state, or back home, my relatives live in a state where they really were having a very bad authority. And in this case, you should do what this midwife do. You should not submit to this bad order. You should not accept this. You know, we are also living in Germany, and often the government was saying this fact that people are dying because of Corona. And this is really very hurtful. And also those who lost someone who had Corona. Corona deaths in Germany were 34,194 in 2020. But when you compare it to the abortions in 2020, you see this number, 99,948. What would I say with this? Because they're often saying, yeah, but we have to protect life. And when I see this speaking from chancellor and from the minister, I would say, why don't you see the whole life of people? Already those who are already in the womb of a mother, they are already existing. These are all also lives. And we are saying, yeah, but this is not that important. And this, for me, is hypocrisy. Hypocrisy of the government. Because in the one hand, they're saying this, in the other hand, they're saying this. No, it's not that important. You can abort. You can kill them. And this is really crazy. And we have to see also those who are starving. 821 million people are starving worldwide. What about this? So I think we have to find a discussion also in the political life that we really want to protect the whole world and not only some parts or some target groups. It's very critical and very bad when politics make too much regulation, when they value too much, because the politics and the government has to punish those who are doing evil. This is the first task. And they should not talk too much about education and put their values into this. No, they really should be those who are saying, no, we are only the state and we are not the state. We are not the people. We are only the state who are bringing everything, only the system. Or maybe you recognize that, or you saw this one-child politics in China. You see this picture here. That is the government who wants to make advertisement for their concept. Say, oh, only one child is so sexy. You only need one child and you are good. But the thinking behind was that they want to diminish the population. In 2001, everyone had no chance to get another child. The second child was not accepted from the government. It was accepted from the parents, but not from the government. What if you would live in a state like this? And since 2016, they said, oh no, we should have more young children because otherwise the population gets too old and we cannot bear the cost anymore. You see when the communist party takes too much, or take over too much from the daily life and values, put values into people's life. This is really very, very, this is wrong at all. It's really totally wrong. Or maybe you saw this also the last days. 100 years of Communist Party in China. And all people were hundreds of thousands. And I see, something is coming up from China. A big military and all in the same system. And this is very dangerous. For me, because the real task of the state is not to control the economy, provide education or distribute money, but to punish evil, to enable coexistence, to keep the peace. This is the first and primary focus and purpose of the state. Otherwise, when the state wants to take over too much, it's really very critical. For example, Brian Houston, a few days ago, he posted something. He's totally not agree with what is happening right now in the world, especially in Australia. He writes, our government have come up with an edict that not even one person can sing into a camera to lead live stream Christian worship. This is clearly religious discrimination and so archaic, it's hard to believe. Christians, stand up. He said, hey, why are you that silent? Why are you accepting this? So not even live stream, they cannot even do live stream worship in Australia. Then you see in the other half of the world, you see people are together in a stadium, 50,000 people. This is crazy. And we cannot even broadcast worship music into this world. Isn't that crazy? Sometimes you have to follow the state. When they really follow also the foundation, what the Lord gave, because every authority is given by the Lord. So there is no authority who has its own power. Because at the end of the day, the Lord is holding everything together. And this is a good saying. You know, I prayed also this morning. I saw Jesus. When I prayed this morning, I saw really Jesus coming in this cloud. And he's coming back from heaven. And he will take authority. And in this moment, every knee will bow. Every dictatorship has to bow. And I can look at them, how they feel. And also me, everyone has to bow down before the Lord. And then a new area will begin. Only peace. Eternal peace. I have to decide that I see that more and more. That Jesus will come and will take up authority. We read also from this, Peter said, hey, you have to follow. Yeah, you have to follow. You have to strictly follow. Paul said, you have to follow because every authority is given by the Lord. But when you a little bit observe the apostles, we read in Acts 5, his speech persuaded them. They called the apostle in and had them flogged. Then they ordered them not to speak in the name of Jesus and let them go. The apostles left the Sanhedrin, rejoicing because they had been counted worthy of suffering disgrace for the name. Day after day, this is so cool, in the temple courts and from house to house, they never stopped teaching and proclaiming the good news that Jesus is the Messiah. They were in the prison. They were beaten. They had to stand up before the Sanhedrin. They stood before the Sanhedrin. They said, you shouldn't, you are not allowed to do it anymore. And they listened like this. They heard it, and it went this way, right? Sometimes it's good. And then you read, they never stopped teaching and proclaiming the good news. So they were continuing. Like if the state wouldn't exist. Sometimes you have to do this. How do I live out a life of submission? It's really good to really accept the authority. But if the authority is hindering you in proclaiming the gospel, then you should not listen to the government. If the government pushes you to sin, then you should not listen to the government. Because every authority is given by the Lord. How do I live out a life of submission? You can live out by subordinate and being obedient to the Lord. This is good. You can live like this, and I recommend you normally to live like this. You can also subordinate and really accept this system of government and listening and doing and paying the taxes and so on. But if they hindering you to proclaim the gospel, then you should be disobedient. In Acts 5, we read this. Peter, he was really very cool guy. No one could stop him, and also his apostles. No one could stop them and proclaiming the gospel. The third, you can be rebellious and disobedient. You know, I would not suggest to be like this. You should not be rebellious against all authority, and you should not be always disobedient. So, for example, Kevin, when Kevin is disciplined or he was loud and the teacher said, please sit down. And Kevin didn't want to sit down, but he sat down anyway. But in his inner feeling, he said, I'm still standing. You can be rebellious and still being disobedient instead of really being the guy who is rebellious and obedient. Or better, subordinate and obedient. We read also that when we go back in the Old Testament, there is another thing. Saul was a really very successful warrior. He was the first king of Israel. And he had several children, and one of them was Jonathan. Jonathan was a very successful warrior. He was like David. He was more, he killed a lot of other soldiers, and he was really very successful. And he had a pure heart. And Saul said that the whole country should fast because they want to win the war, a very important war. And he said fasting is for the next few hours. And Jonathan did not recognize that people were fasting. And instead of that, he started to eat honey. Even though he did not know that, he had to be punished. And we read in the story, Saul said, "May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if you do not die, Jonathan." But the man said to Saul, "Should Jonathan die, he who has brought about this great deliverance in Israel? Never. As surely as the Lord lives, not a hair of his head will fall down to the ground, for he did this today with God's help." So the man rescued Jonathan, and he was not put to death. So here is an example that people stood up against the government, against the authority. And Saul said, "Okay, I will change my mind. I will not punish him." You know, sometimes it's really important that people stand up. Sometimes it's really important that you are not saying, "I'm accepting everything." Also what Brian Houston was writing, he said, hey, we should stand up. We should not accept every discrimination. We should not always say, "Yeah, it's okay, I'm a Christian, and I don't say something against these values of this government." No, we should really stand up and be very conscious that the Lord has something for this government to say through you. From a U.S. Jewish historian, Howard Zinn, we read, "Historically, the most terrible things, war, genocide, and slavery, resulted not from disobedience, but from obedience." Sometimes you have to stand up. Sometimes you should be the guy who is saying, "I do not accept." Also not in your company. You have to talk with someone and saying, "No, I do not accept." That you really use your power that you have actually. That you're saying your voice, that you stand up for the good. That you intervene. Intervene maybe also in education. That you go when you're having like a teacher who is really crazy and telling something crazy story. You know, a teacher has also to not only to speak about evolution, you also have to speak about creation. They should always present two concepts so that people can decide. For me, one of the greatest women ever lived was Corrie ten Boom. She lived in the Netherlands, and she was a watchmaker, a clock. She produced clocks and so on. But she was a person who helped people together with her father, and also her sister. She rescued the Jewish people through this wall. Normally the cabinet stood before the wall, and then people could hide, be hidden there. When you see that she really rescued dozens of Jewish people, she risked her life. She accepted in a way the government, the authority, but she also knew that the time is there to help those who do not have any help. Maybe you are Corrie ten Boom. Maybe you are Corrie. You are having this voice to speak up for others, to stand up for others and saying, I do not accept. I stand up today. Maybe this is your turn. And you are saying no to values that are not Christian at all. And another guy who impresses me a lot is Oskar Schindler. Maybe you saw the movie from Steven Spielberg, Schindler's List. When I watched this movie, I was crying for a long time. And still, this is one of my favorite movies because it shows on the one side the brutality of people who are influenced by the devil, bringing people into the concentration camp, 6 million dying. And on the other side, people like Oskar Schindler, an entrepreneur who produced a lot of things, and he helped the laborers, especially the Jewish laborers. More than 1,200 laborers were saved by his attempts to bring them away from the Nazi regime during the Second World War. When you watch the movie at the end, relatives, thousands, I do not know how many, were putting a stone on his grave. And when I saw this, I said, I want to be one of them. At the end of my life, people should see he helped those who could not help themselves. Oskar Schindler saved thousands of people. All the successes, the generations. It's a big treasure. Should we obey the government? Yes, we should, but we have to be very careful also. We have to be those who are also watching what's going on right now. And those who are standing up, not in a silly way, not only by sending crazy videos and new conspiracy theories, no, by standing up and doing something good. You understand me? Then we can do what also the apostles did in the Acts, the book of Acts 5:29. Peter and the other apostles replied, we must obey God rather than human beings. Sometimes it's really better to obey, or it's always better to obey God. But there are some situations where you should stand up and say, no, I have to trust the Lord and I have to follow Him alone. May God bless you. You have a responsibility as Christians under the government, under the authority, not only to pray for them, but this is also a task, what we should do for the government, praying for the government. It's what we're going to do the next week, 2 times a day. But also being very aware what's going on in this world. Amen.